The gate was open. When she came out to the yard, the latch swung back and hanging loose the way it did when someone lifted it without knowing the trick of it. Feet. She had been inside cutting bread when she heard the horse, and she came out with the knife still in her hand, not thinking. The way you don't think when you've spent the better part of a winter listening for sounds that were coming. The man who tied his horse to the post was not the man she'd been half expecting. This one was broader, better dressed, the kind of coat that had been bought in a city and not worn enough to forget it. He had a satchel over one shoulder, and he moved through her yard the way certain men moved through spaces they had already decided were theirs. "Morning," he said. She set the bread knife on the rail of the porch steps. She did not answer the greeting. The boy was inside. She had sent him to his cot 20 minutes ago with a biscuit and a picture book. One of those small domestic decisions she'd made without examining too closely, the kind that turned out to matter. "I'm here for the child," the man said. He did not phrase it as a question. He said it the way you'd say you'd come for a piece of furniture left in storage. "He's my brother's son, my blood. I've got a letter from the county clerk that says I have the right to collect him, and I mean to do that today." She looked at the satchel. She could see the corner of a folded paper from where she stood. "He's mine," she said. The man's eyebrows went up, not with surprise exactly, more with the particular irritation of a man who has been handed a problem he didn't budget time for. "That's not what the clerk's letter says." "No," she said, "it isn't." She went inside and came back with an envelope. She held it out without stepping down from the porch, so he had to come to her for it. He read it slowly, the way a man reads something he doesn't want to understand. She watched his face and learned the shape of him in those 2 minutes. A man accustomed to winning arguments before they started, who had arranged his life around paperwork arriving in the right order. The envelope was not from the county clerk. "This says guardian," he said finally. "It does. He named you guardian." There was something in his voice now, not anger yet, but the sound of a door that hadn't been expected to be locked. "He named me guardian," she said, in his own hand before 2 witnesses registered in Moose Jaw. The horse stamped once in the cold. Somewhere up the road a crow called, and neither of them looked toward it. "The boy's coming with me," the man said, but the certainty had gone out of it. "No," she said, "he's not." 3 weeks before the man came to her gate, there had been snow. Not the light snow of November that settled and sparkled and made children want to be outside. The heavy, decided snow of January in Saskatchewan, the kind that came in horizontal and meant business. She'd been inside mending a pair of work trousers for the farmer on the next quarter section when she heard the knock. Dr. Quimby knocked 4 times always, a habit of his she'd noticed years ago and never mentioned. He stood on her step with snow on his shoulders and his bag in one hand and an envelope in the other. His face told her what the envelope was before he said a word. "He passed 2 days ago," he said. "The cold came fast and he was already weak. I found him in the morning." She stepped back from the doorway to let him in, more from habit than because she wanted to. "The boy doesn't know yet," Dr. Quimby said. "I wanted to bring you this first." He held out the envelope. "He gave it to me in October. Said to hold it until, he said you'd understand the timing." She took it. The paper was thick, the edges soft from being handled many times. "He knew you'd argue if he gave it to you himself," the doctor said, not unkindly. She set the envelope on the table. The boy was in the back room. She'd put him down an hour ago with a picture book, the one with illustrations of animals from places neither of them had ever been. She could hear, faintly, the sound of a page turning. He was not asleep. She broke the seal and read the letter standing at the table while Dr. Quimby waited near the door with his hat in both hands. The letter was short, the handwriting uneven in places, a man writing through effort. He had named her, not as a caretaker, not as a temporary arrangement. He had used the word guardian, underlined it once, and beneath it written a sentence she read 3 times. "I have asked nothing of you that you did not give freely, and I leave you nothing you cannot keep." There were 2 witness signatures below his name. She recognized one, the postmaster in town. She did not recognize the other. "He registered it," she said. in Moose Jaw last November before the cold came. She folded the letter and set it back in the envelope. Outside, the snow was still coming. His brother will come, she said. Likely, said Dr. Quimby. Men like that usually do. She nodded once. It was the kind of nod that ends a conversation, and Dr. Quimby, who had known her long enough to read her silences, picked up his bag. The boy will need telling, he said from the doorway. I know, she said, not tonight. The doctor didn't argue. He put his hat on and went out into the snow, and she stood in the kitchen a long time after his horse was gone, listening to the page turning from the back room, steady and deliberate, a child feigning sleep with great concentration. She had not told him that night, or the night after. She waited until the third morning, when the snow had stopped and the light came in clean and white through the kitchen window, and he was sitting at the table eating porridge, with the particular focus he brought to porridge, as though it required his full attention. She sat across from him and told him plainly the way she told him most things, with no extra weight on the words and no apology for their shape. His father had died. He had been sick for a long time. He had loved the boy very much. The boy did not cry right away. He set his spoon down very carefully at the edge of the bowl, the way he set things down when he was deciding something, and he looked at the table for a while. Is that why he sent me here? He asked. Yes. So he wouldn't have to watch me watch him go. She had not expected him to say it so directly. She looked at his face, 8 years old, thin at the jaw, his father's coloring, and said, I think that's right. He picked up his spoon again. He did not eat for a while, but he held it. Are you going to send me somewhere else now? He asked. No, she said. He looked up then. No, she said again, because once hadn't seemed like enough. He ate his porridge. She drank her tea. Outside, the cold pressed flat and bright against the window, the kind of winter morning that asked nothing of you and offered nothing back. She got up to put more wood on the fire, and when she came back his bowl was empty, and he was carrying it to the basin without being asked, the way he'd started doing 2 weeks before, quietly, on his own, as though he'd decided that was simply what was done here. Before that morning, before the snow, there had been October. She had been stacking firewood against the east wall of the house, working fast because the sky had the color of iron and the temperature had been dropping since noon when she heard the gate. The man who came through it was not well. She could see that before he was halfway up the path. The way he moved, careful with each step, one hand light against his side, the way people held themselves when breathing cost them something. He stopped at the edge of her work and did not come closer. I've been told you take in washing, he said. I do, she said, though she had a feeling by then that he hadn't come about washing. I've got a boy, he said. He's 8, good at keeping himself occupied, quiet enough. His mother's been gone 3 years. He stopped there, reorganized his breath. I need someone to keep him through the winter. She set down the piece of wood she was holding. Through the winter. He looked at her. Something in his face arranged itself carefully. I'm not well, he said. Winter might be longer than I'm telling you. She stood in her yard with the first edge of cold coming off the fields and looked at this man who had told her less than half the truth and all of it at once. Where's the boy now? She asked. With the Quimbys. I didn't want to bring him until I knew. Knew what? If you'd say yes. She looked at him for a long moment. He was watching her with the patience of a man who has run out of options but will not show it. His coat was good wool but worn at the collar. He had not come to her carelessly. I charge $8 a month for board, she said. I'll want that settled by the 1st of November. It'll be settled, he said. Bring him Saturday, she said, before noon. Fawn, he nodded. He didn't thank her, which she respected, because a thank you in that moment would have felt like something being folded too quickly, something that needed more room to breathe. He walked back out through the gate, and she watched him go down the road toward town, slower than he'd come. The iron sky had gone the color of ash by then, and the first few flakes were beginning, small and exploratory, the way first snow always came, as though it wasn't sure yet whether it was staying. The boy came on Saturday with a canvas bag over one shoulder, and a careful measuring look that she recognized immediately. The look of a child who has learned to assess a room before he commits himself to it. She showed him where he would sleep. She showed him where the woodbox was and what it needed to look like before supper. She showed him the outhouse and the pump and the shelf where she kept the tins of tea and oats. He watched all of this without saying much. On the third day, she noticed the button. It was on his coat, the top one, a wooden button, dark brown, the kind that had been carved rather than bought. It was loose, the thread worn through on one side, hanging by what was probably one good pull away from being lost entirely. She noticed it when he came in from feeding the chickens, frost on his collar, the button swinging as he moved. She could have repaired it in 5 minutes. She had thread to match. She did not repair it that day or the next. She let it sit in the particular way she let things sit when she was deciding something she hadn't finished deciding yet. She was not deciding about the button. She was deciding about the coat. Whether it would keep hanging on the hook by her door through the cold months. Whether mending a thing meant promising it a future. She had made that kind of promise before and paid the full cost of it. She did not make promises lightly anymore. Not since the winter 3 years back that had taken more from her than she'd told anyone in this town or any other. She knew how a room felt after something was gone from it. She knew the particular weight of a hook on a wall with nothing hanging from it. She left the button. She watched it swing each time he came through the door. She went on with her work. It was February before the button finally came off. He set it on the table beside her sewing basket without being asked, found it in his coat pocket, apparently, where it had landed when the thread gave way, and stood there a moment waiting to see what she'd do. She looked at it, looked at him. "You know where the basket is," she said. He blinked. "Threads on the left side. Find something close to that color." She nodded at the button. "And get a needle with a wide eye, the bigger ones, in the bone case." He did not move right away. "I don't know how," he said. "No," she said, "not yet." She talked him through it. She did not do it for him. His first attempt pulled the thread too tight and puckered the wool. His second was better. By the third pass through, he had the hang of the motion, and by the time the button was fixed, it sat a little crooked on the coat. The thread bunched on one side where he'd started without quite enough slack, but it was solid. He held the coat up. He was looking at the button the way she'd seen him look at arithmetic he'd gotten right on the second try, with a kind of careful satisfaction, as if he wasn't ready to trust it yet. "That'll hold," she said. She did not offer to redo it. She did not mention the crooked hang of it. She took the coat and put it back on the hook by the door and went back to her own work, and after a moment he sat down at the table and picked up the reader she'd borrowed for him from the school. She heard him turn a page, then another, slower on the second one, trying to sound out a word. She kept her eyes on her sewing and said nothing. And after a minute he said the word out loud to himself, quietly, not asking, just claiming it. She heard it. She said nothing. That was its own kind of answer. There was a night in January, deep in the cold when the stove couldn't quite keep up with the wind off the flat, that she heard him moving in the back room. Not the thrashing kind of sound, not a nightmare, a quieter thing, the sound of a child sitting awake in the dark on purpose. She got up. He was sitting on the edge of his cot with his blanket around his shoulders, not looking at anything in particular. The window above him showed a sky thick with stars, the prairie kind of dark that is never truly dark. "Bad night," she said. He shook his head. "Then he used to get cold, Papa. At night when it was like this, I could hear him through the wall getting up to add wood." He looked at his hands. "I keep thinking I hear it." She sat on the chair beside the cot. The cold was significant at her ankles. "He didn't sleep well in winter," the boy said. "I don't think he ever told anyone that." "He told me," she said, "because it was true." The man had mentioned it once in October, almost in passing, his hand against his side, watching the sky go gray. Cold gets into the chest something fierce. Always has. She had not understood at the time why he was telling her. She understood it now. He had been giving her inventory. Everything she would need to know. The boy looked at her sideways. "Did he talk to you a lot?" No, she said. He talked the way he needed to. The boy considered this. He pulled the blanket tighter. I don't want to go to my uncle, he said. It was quiet and definite, the way he said things when he'd been thinking about them for a long while. I know, she said. Is he going to come? She was honest with him, probably. He was quiet a moment. What are you going to do? She looked at the window, at the hard scatter of stars over the flat land. What your father set up for me to do, she said. What he asked. The boy leaned back against his pillow. He didn't ask anything else. She sat with him until his breathing steadied and his hands unclenched from the blanket edge. And then she went back to her own room and lay awake, listening to the wind, thinking that a man who couldn't sleep in winter had spent his last clear weeks arranging things for the people who would be awake in it after him. In March, there was a Sunday at the church hall when she went, because not going would have said more than going did. She brought the boy. He wore his coat with the button he'd sewn himself, still sitting a hair crooked, and he stood close to her side in the way he'd settled into over the winter. Not clutching, just present, the way you stand near someone whose position you've learned to trust. A woman she knew slightly, wide-faced, practical, the kind of woman who considered directness a virtue and deployed it whether or not you'd asked, set down her tea and said, He's been with you a good while now, the Hadley boy. He has, she said. His father's gone, I heard. The woman's voice was not unkind. It was the voice of a town taking inventory. His uncle's got the farm now. Will the boy be going out there, do you think? She poured herself a cup of tea and did not hurry with it. He's where he's meant to be, she said. The woman said, which meant several things at once and committed to none of them. Someone across the hall asked about the road to Carnduff and whether the thaw had softened it, and the room moved sideways into that, and she let it. On the walk home, the boy's boots made small craters in the last of the dirty March snow. That woman was asking about me, he said. She was. What does she think is going to happen? She walked on a few steps before answering. People think what they've seen before. They haven't seen this before. What is this? He asked. She considered the question the way she considered all questions that deserved an honest answer. Something that's already decided, she said. She just doesn't know it yet. He walked on beside her. The road was good, solid, almost dry. Neither of them mentioned it. When the man came to her gate on that April morning with his county clerk's letter and his city coat, she had already been awake an hour. She'd known, in the way you know weather that's been coming for days, that this was the kind of morning something arrived. After he read the Guardian letter, after the silence that followed it, the man tried once more. He said the boy was blood, that she was a stranger, that no judge in the province would. There's a judge in Moose Jaw who has already reviewed the document, she said. Dr. Quimby filed a copy with the court 3 weeks ago. The ruling came back Thursday. The man went still. She reached into her apron pocket and brought out a second envelope. This one had the court's mark on it. She held it out the same way she'd held the first, without stepping down from the porch, so he had to come to her. He read it more slowly than the other one. When he was done, he looked up, and she saw something leave his face. Not shame exactly, but the expression of a man whose pieces have been removed from the board while he was in the other room. He didn't tell me, the man said. Not to her, more to the heir or to his absent brother. No, she said. He arranged things so you'd know when it was too late to argue them. The man's horse shifted, impatient. He looked at the house, at the closed door, the curtain that had not moved, though she would have wagered everything she owned that the boy was awake behind it. He's well, the man said finally. It was the first question he'd asked that had nothing to do with paperwork. He's well, she said. He folded both letters and held them out to her. She took them. He looks like my brother, the man asked. Around the eyes, she said. Something crossed his face that she didn't name. He put his hat back on, walked to his horse, mounted it, and rode back out through the still open gate. She listened to the sound of hooves on the dry road until she couldn't anymore. She went inside. The boy was not on his cot. He was standing just inside the kitchen doorway with the reader still in his hand, open to the same page he'd been on for half an hour. "Did he leave?" he asked. "He left," she said. He stood there a moment, very still, and then he walked back to the table and sat down and looked at the page. She went to the stove. She heard him begin to read again, not aloud, but moving his lips slightly over the harder words, the way he did when he was working through something that mattered. She put the kettle on. April opened itself up slowly the way it did on the prairie, reluctantly, in stages, each warm day followed by a night that reminded you it wasn't finished being winter yet. The light that came in through the kitchen window in the afternoons was new light, thinner, and longer than what they'd been living under since October. On a Saturday, she was sitting on the step with a jacket of his that had gone at the elbow, the lining pulled through, the kind of wear that needed good light and patience. When he came around the side of the house with an armful of split wood, dropping a few pieces on the path and stopping to collect them with the economy of motion he'd been developing all winter, the efficiency of a boy learning not to waste steps. He stacked the wood against the wall. He dusted his hands on his trousers. Then he sat down on the step beside her, not quite touching, and looked out at the yard. "Can I see?" he said. She handed him the jacket. He looked at the elbow, turned it over. He had learned enough now to read the problem, where the lining had separated, where the outer fabric had thinned. "Same needle as the button?" he asked. "Heavier," she said. "Get the curved one on the right side of the case." He went inside. She heard the basket, the case opening. He came back with the right needle and a spool. "Match the thread to what's already there," she said. "Hold it up to the light." He did. He chose the right spool, not perfectly, a shade lighter than what was there, but close enough to hold. She watched him thread the needle on the second try. She watched him knot the end without being told, because she had shown him once in February, and he had not forgotten. She watched him set the first stitch. It was better than the button, not good yet, the pull still slightly uneven, the angle not quite right, but better. It's more certain. She didn't take it from him. She watched the road at the end of the yard and the new grass coming up pale at the edge of the fence line, and she let him work. When he paused to check his line, squinting slightly and tilting it toward the light, something in his face did a quiet thing, private, the kind of thing a person does when they find that what they made has held. He ran his thumb along the seam, the way she ran her thumb along her own seams, out of habit, out of something that was neither pride nor relief, but lived in the neighborhood of both. He handed the jacket back. She took it. She ran her thumb along the same line. It was sound. She handed it back. "Do the other side," she said. And he did, bent over the cloth in the long April light, with his tongue just touching the corner of his mouth, the way he concentrated, the way she'd learned to recognize as his version of being entirely at ease. The prairie running flat to the tree line in every direction, the sky that pale tentative blue it only managed in April, and the seam growing straight and even beneath his hands, stitch by stitch, as unhurried as the season coming in.